Now, this is Dr. Jay Garlitz. I'm a dentist myself and secretary of the Medical Amateur Radio Council. Today, we're having a joint meeting, a simulcast on Zoom and also on amateur radio. Our slides that we're using for the amateur radio side, for the multimedia side, are located on healthcarehands.org. So people that are actually on shortwave radio have the opportunity of also participating in a multimedia format. Today, we're talking about the hedonic effect, the impact on sports spectators, a focus on fan behavior, crowd atmosphere, and game day experience, with a special focus on the World Cup, which is here in 3 countries and the United States included. But inside the brain's reward system, medically, the hedonic effect, it's a whole system reward response, central brain circuitry, working along body-wide chemicals and autonomic signals. And we can go through the science of all that. But you get to the prefrontal cortex and you weigh the reward and shape the drive to pursue it again. So when we get it going here, the neurochemistry is dopamine and it drives wanting, while the opioids and endocannabinoids deliver the liking. And their body-wide signals affect your arousal, your heart rate, your hormones. And in doing that, it's a whole system that can bring us a lot of pleasure and also the downs when it's over with. And liking and wanting, what's wrong with that? What can be wrong? How can that be an issue for us? Because there's a key clinical distinction that separates the pleasure of a reward from the drive to pursue it. And it explains how reward turns to harm. So the liking of a hedonic impact, it's the raw pleasure of a reward and the felt experience of enjoyment generated in the brain's opioid hotspots. And of course, last night, there were lots of that from the basketball game here in the United States. For many soccer or football fans, same. They're getting that liking, that good feeling that comes from participating or watching sports, in this particular case, as a spectator. We also have wanting, the dopamine-driven craving to seek the reward can escalate even as the pleasure itself fades. So that could be an issue if you have to continue to seek that pleasure and get addicted. If you can see why drugs hijack reward and wanting outruns liking in the system. And you can also have the lost pleasure marking depression and withdrawal. And adaptation rewards dull over time, which tends to null escalation. And alcohol myopia, a narrowing lens. So rather than simply disinhibiting alcohol, itself produces a kind of nearsightedness, magnifying the effect in the immediate environment while dimming awareness of the consequences. As one can see in sporting events, alcohol is very common. And then you also get into the potential for medical problems when we're dealing with the summer. And during the summer, we are in the heat watching a sporting event. It can be very harmful in excess. Well, I have with us other individuals that I'd like to bring on to be part of this discussion. We have a psychiatrist with us, Chip Keister. Chip, if you're monitoring, we'll take the mic. I know in the past you had talked about some of the problems with alcohol and heat with Mardi Gras in New Orleans. And perhaps you would like to expand upon this discussion about alcohol and the effects and the enjoyment and risks. So let me turn the mic over to N5RTF. This is WD5B. Go ahead, Chip.
Well, this is one subject that you really don't have to have any medical experience at all to know about. Almost everybody has tried alcohol and they're aware of the effects it has on them. That's one of the things that's probably not mentioned as much as the enormous individual variation. There are people usually of northwestern European extraction who can drink enormous amounts of alcohol and still be highly functional. And then there are other persons, usually from Asian backgrounds, who have very limited capacity. So the same amount of alcohol produces very different effects in different individuals based on a lot of different things. women can only handle about half as much alcohol as men. And when they do drink more, they get much more intoxicated. Um, so I'll go on and listen to what else you have. I think this is a good topic, and I think it's very timely. And 5 RTM.
Okay, thank you, Chip. M5RTF, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. It is timely in terms of the World Cup, of course, in summer sports, because now we also get heat in associated with this too. So as we're hot and we're drinking, Chip, well, let's see maybe if Andy can comment on this. WJB is with us with some internal medicine family practice. So Andy, when one consumes alcohol, especially when they're hot, have you seen in practice individuals have gotten into trouble? And why drink, why reach for a cold beverage with alcohol in the summertime? Do you think there's a reason why people do that, other than the pleasure? WJ8B, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. Turning the mic over to you.
Okay, well, you know, times I've actually seen people get into trouble with alcohol that would be related to temperature has actually been more cold. People will go to a football game, in particular in November or December, and kind of lose the sense of how cold they are. And some of those people have gotten into deep trouble. An example of that was one of the Bengals games. Way back in the early 1980s, we had a whole groups of people taking their shirts off and drinking heavily, and some of those individuals died. Okay, they weren't under my care, obviously, but it was well around the medical literature at the time, and I remember seeing those people on on the television show as well. So the as far as heat, it does impair that as well. I just haven't seen it as much in clinical practice.
Thank you very much, Andy, WJB, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. For ID, this is AA4FL, the microphone. Today, the transmissions are out of Hawthorne, Florida. That's the club call. Personal call is AA4FL, and the transmissions are from my station in Hawthorne, Florida. Appreciate the description, Andy. So what is the hedonic effect? What about alcohol? It heightens the pleasure spectators take in a live event, amplifying enjoyment in the moment while loosening the brakes on behavior, which of course could be another issue. And as we know, soccer has its hooligans, but I'm sure the World Cup they're much more refined, and be pretty tough to afford the tickets and waste your time being a hooligan. But the pleasure is amplified, so alcohol enhances the mood and social bonding and intensifying the highs of celebration and shared experience among fans. So I imagine the New York's Knicks fans probably experienced some of that. But it's anchored in the now by narrowing attention to the immediate vivid cues of the game. Alcohol lets drinkers savor the present, untethered from outside worries. And the brakes are loosened, so the same narrowing dampens long-term judgment and impulse control, raising the odds of risky or disinhibited behavior. So how many times have there have been issues from people that have had the brakes loosened, even on airplanes where people have become drunk and tried to get into the cockpits and such. Bernie, KD5QHV, you're with us here on Zoom, and being a pilot and also having served in the military, and I know you're not supposed to, as a pilot, consume alcohol within flying time. Can you tell us a little bit about some of what you've seen with individuals that were passengers on planes or in the military that have had problems? Has that, are those brakes being loosened with judgment being affected been a problem that you've observed? KD5QHV, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta, turning the mic to you, Bernie.
KD5QHV, good morning, Jay, and everyone on the net. Well, no, I can't say I've really seen too much in the way of that. The military is pretty straightforward, and there's they at least subscribe to the civilian requirement of minimum of 8 hours between bottle and throttle, and they probably lean more towards the idea of maybe 12 hours. As a general rule, in the military, no. Maybe Vietnam, I heard a few stories, and we'll just not delve on them, but I'm sure there was a little bit more drinking going on in that time frame. From the civilian standpoint, in my line of work where I was, flying with the same number of people all the time, basically, whatever, alcohol was never really a serious issue with them. Again, because, the principal drank, but not to excess. And I don't think he would put up with anyone doing it in excess and being on the airplane and, acting out some of this alcohol related type stuff. I don't think that would have flown very well with him. Back to you, Jay, K85QHV.
Okay, thank you, Bernie. We appreciate your input.
Question.
Comments? We have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, don't the effects of alcohol get worse with alcohol and decreased air pressure, decreased oxygen? I know from personal experience that you start out drinking a normal amount, and then the plane goes up to 20,000 feet, and suddenly you get very lightheaded in 5 RTF.
Okay, Bernie, if you could comment, I know not from a medical standpoint, but can you explain some of the pressure differences in flying at 20,000 feet and, when physiology might be altered? And I know in the past we've had discussions here on our nets about heart conditions and people that are flying. So perhaps our listeners here on the internet, on our YouTube channel, and also on 20 meters, would like to know a little bit more about alcohol or just, just the environment of a cockpit at 20,000 feet. Can you just speak to the environment of a cockpit in terms of air pressure, Bernie? KD5QHV, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta.
Well, I can't really address that very well. However, what I will tell you is this: you're saying 20,000 feet. More and more the corporate aircraft and now even the commercial airplanes are flying between 35 and 41,000 feet. So the altitude up there might be as high as in the cabin, maybe 5 or 6,000 feet versus what people might be used to, especially someone coming from sea level. Now they're at 6 or 7,000 foot cabin altitude, and so there's generally speaking, you normally expect to see less oxygen in there in that realm, and it's problems associated with that are probably a lot more prevalent. But again, and what I was doing, I can't really talk to that. I really didn't see that. Like I say, for the most part, our guys were pretty mellow because if the principal's on board, you better be behaving, or you're probably not getting on the next trip. So, but again, you've got conditions that the atmosphere is thinner, and that's going to have an impact on your body one way or the other. Back to you, Jay, KD5QHV.
Okay, thank you, KD5QHV, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta AA4FL, the mic. So if I understand that correctly, I think we've talked about that before. So regardless of the altitude of the airplane, the air pressure in the cabin is set on those high-flying jets, commercial jets. They're set to be the equivalent of 5 to 6,000 foot elevation air pressure. Is that correct? Am I understanding that?
That's generally correct. I mean, what as new aircraft come out, they keep on, trying to work on that to make it where it's like, you don't even notice the difference. When you leave at 4,000 feet, you're only going to 6,000 feet. Cabin altitude is not a big change, but if you're going to sea level of 6,000 feet, there's more of a change there, and that's kind of what people will notice. If and when they fly, as you well experienced, coming from sea level, when you got up here and you started hiking around or going up and down stairs and stuff like that, you realized there was a difference in your ability to do those things because of the difference in altitude.
Okay, thank you, Bernie. Bernie, being that you're in El Paso, and I know you have months where there's 100-degree temperatures, consecutive days, 30 consecutive days. I know you're not a physician, but perhaps you can share the Zoom recording of today's session with some of your physician friends, and have them just enlighten you as to some of what they feel. Now, El Paso, I'm not sure what the elevation there is, but here in Florida, for us, we're going from 0 to 6,000 is quite a change. So when you're on a trip, you're already if you're going on vacation, you're already enjoying yourself, so your inhibitions are already reduced. And if you're drinking on the plane, I imagine that potential is increased. One other thing you mentioned, Bernie, is that you were sure in Vietnam, if the wars were a little different than with the military than they were in other wars. The kind of stress that was involved in the Vietnam War. I mean, and I think back, what was the book, Catch-22? Was that about Korea? Regardless, if you're at war, an active war, are you crazy to do that? Or are you crazy if you don't abuse something? That's the Catch-22. And maybe I'm interpreting that incorrectly. Chip, my psychiatrist, our psychiatrist for an N5RTF, would you like to comment on that? Go ahead, N5RTF.
Well, Catch-22 was set in Italy after World War II during the occupation. And it was the Catch-22 basically was that you were crazy whichever way you chose, and that crazy became sort of the normal mode of operation for all of these interesting, bizarre characters that Joseph Heller was describing. It was a good book, and I'm trying to remember if I've ever seen the movie or not, but it's a classic, along with MASH, which was Korea. I don't know that anybody's really done a humorous Vietnam movie. May take another couple of generations before anybody feels up to that task. It just it was a different world, and still too close to us at this point. One other interesting thing while I've got the mic, New Orleans was sort of the origin of iced drinks. People drank whiskey and beer at room temperature up until the mid 1800s. And there was a gentleman in Boston, and I don't remember his name, but he would ship blocks of ice, which were sawed out of the rivers in winter. He would ship them in sawdust on the railroads down to New Orleans, where they would be chipped and shaved and put into cocktails. Sazerac was the first one that became known for being able to have a cool drink in the summertime, which was a wonderful, wonderful thing if you've been through a New Orleans summer. N5RTF.
Okay, thank you, Chip. N5RTF. This is AA4FL to Mike for ID. Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta is our club call. Medical Radio Council, Grand Rounds on the Internet. We've been meeting for many, many years at this time. I do appreciate all the amateurs are allowing us their use of frequency. I would like on 20 meters to take any additional check-ins, especially if you're an amateur that's monitoring this conversation. We're going to be talking in the context of the World Cup shortly, and being a sports spectator. Would love to hear your comments. So looking for check-ins at this time. Make your call to Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. We have one station that's off frequency. Are you looking to check in to our net? Over. Okay, we must have a little bit of QRM there. Well, let's continue on here. Of course, we'll have opportunity for plenty of questions. So drinking is woven into the fabric of fandom. And if we think there's 50% plus of Americans identify as sports fans, that's 200 million people approximately, and 40% drink alcohol while attending baseball and football games. That generates $50 billion in revenue on teams and leagues spent annually by sports fans. So for many spectators, alcohol is less of a side activity and more part of the entertainment package itself. bound up with the rituals, sociability, the shared emotion of crowds. And, here in the United States, soccer or football is now, becoming a very popular sport. Of course, we're hosting the World Cup right now. And, the European situation might be even more ingrained in alcohol. I'm not sure, but we'll talk about it. But celebration beats frustration. So tracking high frequency beer sales against live match events, researchers found that positive emotional jolts move fans to the concession stands. Surprise, consistently lifting beer sales as fans drink in emotionally charged moments. There's suspense that tends to suppress the sales. Fans hold their breath rather than their cups if they're in suspense. So they're probably celebrating a nice lead. I guess the Knicks fans didn't get a chance to drink till the end of the fourth quarter then, huh? And positive states dominate negative ones. So celebration outweighs frustration and the effect of the size. And from what I've seen at sporting events in the college environment, people don't wait for those great moments to drink. Often they've already started at the beginning of the game. But game day raises the baseline, so self-identified fans drink more heavily than non-fans, and consumption climbs sharply around the event itself, especially before kickoff. And we have some AI assistance in generating these slides, and this is scientifically noted. So we also have our references. If you go to healthcarehams.org, healthcarehams.org, you can bring all this up in the slides of today's prompts, what we're speaking off of, the background material. And you don't need to be on a computer now. You can be on 20 meters here and have access to the multimedia aspects. Just go to the homepage of healthcarehams.org and look for the posts on the main page in the right-hand section. But it's a carnivalesque environment. Focus groups have been held with supporters, and fans frame drinking as central to a festive rule-bending atmosphere. Of course, it's a release from everyday life. And just think about the money people are spending on these events. If it wasn't a release from everyday life and highly enjoyable, they wouldn't be there. They just watch it on TV. It's not the same for many people. So sociability, friendship, and shared identity sit at the heart of the experience. And when you're attending it live in the summer, you're also having to deal with the heat as well. So when you're drinking and build social capital, bonding rituals that knit the crowd together. But if you're watching at home, you're not necessarily in a crowd. You could be watching at a sports bar, but then you don't have the heat as a consideration. Fans see heavy drinking, violent stereotypes as outdated and unfair. So just because you go to one, you don't want to be considered to be somebody that can't handle their alcohol. But when does the peak actually occur? Does it during the game or is the peak before the game? So wearable heart monitoring of fans where a 4-hour match found emotions and physiological arousal spiking during the pregame rituals, not just at kickoff. So crowds synchronize emotionally beating as one long before the play begins. You've got tailgates here, and we're talking about college football, pro football, ritual food and drinking ignite the collective excitement. There's pregame arousal and consumption that peaks as anticipation builds, and that kickoff emotional synchrony carries into the crowd during the match. And full-time outcome amplifies celebration or frustration. We have lots of considerations, and that's even before considering the weather and the effect of heat on the physiology. So why do fans drink and what follows? The identity, motive, and aggression. Strongly identified fans drink for different reasons, and those motives map into distinct forms of aggression towards rivals and officials. So social motives, drink to celebrate, bond, and amplify the group experience. And aggression linked more to spontaneous hostile reactions in the heat of the moment. What about escape motives? Drinking to cope with stress or aversive feelings. And aggressive linked to calculated instrumental aggression aimed at a goal. And when I say aimed at a goal, I don't mean the soccer goal. But the World Cup, what does the World Cup have to do with this? And I'm going to pause one more time here for comments and questions. Let's hear from our Zoom participants. If you have any comments at this time, just speak that you would like to participate, and we'll go ahead and make a list. Make your call this time.
This is N4JEL.
Okay, we have N4JEL. We'll put you on the list, Mike, for comments. Any further individuals that would like to make comments?
Yeah, WB1FFI, just a quick comment.
Okay, WB1FFI would like to make comments as well. Anyone else? Well, let me turn the mic over to Mike. N4JEL, thank you for being with us, Mike. Go ahead.
Good morning, folks. Sorry for having my camera off, but I just got back from the gym and look real nasty. I live in Tallahassee, Florida, the home of the Florida State Seminoles, and I have witnessed everything you've talked about and more. N4JEL.
Yes, I'm sure the Tallahassee Seminoles are similar to what goes on here in Gainesville and Syracuse. With the next speaker is from WB1FFI. Now go ahead, Barry.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everyone on the net. Chip, you just made an interesting comment a few minutes ago about the military and regarding Vietnam. And what came to mind was the movie with Robin Williams, Good Morning Vietnam, which came out, I don't know, about 15, 20 years ago. I lose track. But he tried to infuse some humor into a very, difficult situation. And it's amazing what comedians can do to get us to laugh about things as difficult as they might be. I just wanted to mention that, Chip.
Yeah, good. That's a good point. Yeah, and you going back, to World War II, Hogan's Heroes. Nobody was particularly offended by Hogan's Heroes, but it seems like there's some formula with the amount of emotion invested in a particular war, perhaps even the outcome of it and the length of time that's passed, that allows you to do things. South Park is famous for doing jokes that they're like, oh, too soon, and it's right though, because people they can't tell you exactly when it's right to make a joke, but they know when it's too early. N5RTF.
Yeah, and I would also comment. I was watching a Mel Brooks thing on TV, and he was talking about when he made The Producers, which was actually originally called Springtime for Hitler, and it's a spoof on the Nazis, which I mean, that you're walking a fine knife edge when you're dealing with material like that. But it was a hit, and people received it very well at the time. So, just interesting how comedians are able to navigate this narrow edge. Thank you.
Thank you. Both that was WB1FFI and N5RTF.
I have a couple of comments.
Okay, and I'll turn it over to Jerry, N4TSC, in a minute. Jerry, Mike, thank you for your comments about Tallahassee. Tallahassee and Gainesville have a similarity. And, you start these football games in September, it's extremely hot here, and wicked, but yet the crowd has the same fervor. So I would think that probably translates well to our discussion about the World Cup, because the World Cup's being held right now, and it's pretty darn hot too as well. So thank you very much for your comments, Mike, and for JEL. N4TSC, Jerry is with us. I'm going to turn the mic over to you. This is Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta.
Okay, good morning, everyone. And Jay, I'd just like you at the outset tell you that you're about 3x5 on SDR, and I've got no direct signal from you at all, but obviously you're full quieting on Zoom. So anyway, I think of some of the comments that we've made before. I think the faster your metabolism is, that the greater your tolerance for alcohol is. And I think larger people probably have a little bit of a dilution effect. And we all know that all alcohol is toxic. It's just a matter of how toxic it is. And I guess it depends not just on what you're drinking, but what the concentration of it is. But I think that alcohol gives a certain kind of social acceptance, and it it gives people an excuse for breaking norms. And I think that's the reason why you have an enhancement of sometimes bizarre social behavior. And it's used as an excuse by many, many people. They say, oh, I was drunk and that's why I did this and that. And I won't go into the political commentary of people who have used that as an excuse, but that seems to be something that's coming to the fore these days. As far as a hedonic effect, I understood that this is a sort of a change from a baseline. You can either be very happy and exuberant. For example, I watched the Nets game, and if you saw Jerry Seinfeld on the sidelines, I mean, his response was absolute shock, and he was just open mouth, and he just couldn't move. And obviously, he had a positive effect. And I think that there's also probably a depressive effect as well. And one of the things I've noticed, and I would like Chip to comment on this. This is my personal observation. I've noted that when I'm really happy about, let's say, an event like the Knicks coming through, and in the words of Al Michaels, do you believe in miracles? That was a miracle. I mean, the to have a defense that was able to withstand a 7'4" player who could just block every shot, and to still find a way to come back 29 points in game four, and coming back 15 points in game five. I mean, that's just unbelievable. But people will remember that particular game, and they will reminisce, and they will talk about it, and they will try to relive it. And I think that's part of the hedonic experience that you're talking about. So my question for Chip is, I've noticed that my sense of departure from the baseline to be very happy in a situation with a win is not nearly as great as my feeling of depression when I face a loss. And I think the history of the Knicks having 53 years of just failure in terms of trying to repeat what they did in '73 in the days of DeBusschere and Willis Reed and so on, who were and Bill Bradley. This was the last time 53 years ago that they won. They won a championship with a 2-year spread, and then they've gone 53 years. So you would expect that there's a euphoria. But I think that the euphoria is just not as great as the feeling of depression when you fail. So I wonder what the psychiatric analysis of that is, and I just like Chip to comment on it.
Okay, N5RTF. This is Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta with N4TSC. Is that the mic?
Yeah, a good rule of thumb is just not to drink if you're unhappy. You should only drink when you're happy, because it amplifies whatever emotion you're experiencing. And if you're happy to begin with, then the alcohol is likely, to boost that and give you a pleasurable experience. One other thing before people get too down on alcohol, remember that half of everybody on Earth was an unplanned pregnancy. There was a commercial by Old Spice that said, if your grandfather hadn't worn it, you wouldn't be here. Well, you could probably say the same thing for alcohol. Half of us wouldn't be here if somebody had had a drink at one particular moment. N5RTF.
Thank you, Chip. N5RTF. This is Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta for ID. Grand Rounds near net, medical amateur radio accounts, our weekly net here on this frequency. If you're an amateur radio operator, we're going to give you the opportunity, if you haven't checked in yet, to check in and to also make comments, be involved in the conversation. We're open to all amateurs. You don't have to be a member of the Medical Amateur Radio Council, also known as Healthcare Ham. So we're looking for, first of all, for additional check-ins from 20 meters. Make your call at this time.
The 3 Bravo Alpha Tango.
Hey, Bravo Alpha Tango, repeat your call.
So Whiskey Alpha 3 Bravo Alpha Tango.
Okay, thank you. Whiskey Alpha 3 Bravo Alpha Tango, thank you very much. We'll give you an opportunity in just a moment here to ask questions or make comments. Do we have anyone else that would like to check in and make comments? Make your call. Okay, Whiskey Alpha 3 Bravo Alpha Tango. This is Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. Welcome to the net. If you'd let us know your name and then go ahead and take the microphone, and hopefully we have a question or a comment from you. Go ahead.
Yeah, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. This is WA3 Bravo Alpha Tango. Bravo Alpha Tango. Hey, here's Jerry. I'm Yankee. And I'm here operating the plus station on board the historic reserve with you Olympia here in Philadelphia and Penn Landing. So it's been a lot of bands trying to get so we heard you calling for check-ins and particular questions. Interesting net you have here. You're running 5.9. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Jerry. WA3 Bravo Alpha Tango. Well, thank you very much also for participating in a special event here around the ship. And I'm sure you're going to have many individuals that will want to talk to you because those are very popular operating activities. Good for amateur radio, good for the memories as well. It's nice to honor those in service and the equipment that was in service as well, those the individuals. Do we have any further comments on 20 meters? Make your call to Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. Okay, Kilo, is it Kilo Foxtrot 4, Juliet Foxtrot? Go ahead and make the call again.
PXC channel.
Romeo 4.
Okay, Kilo Romeo 4, Juliet Foxtrot Papa. Thank you for being here. We don't have you real strong, but we do appreciate you being with us. And I may have to relay your question, but I'll go ahead and make your call and let me know if you have any questions or comments. KR4 JFP, thank you for checking in. Do you have any questions or comments regarding our net discussion today?
Checking in, trying new radio. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. You're readable without QRM. There's a little bit of QRM here, but otherwise you're doing fine. So this is AA4 Alpha Mike for ID, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. We're operating out of Hawthorne, Florida here today with club calls for the Medical Amateur Radio Council for you. Those of you on 20 meters and aren't familiar with it. If you have an interest and we're using a PowerPoint as a prompt for our discussion today. So there are multimedia slides that can be viewed for those of you on 20 meters that would like to actually see a little bit more than's possible just discussion. So go ahead to our website, healthcarehands.org, one word, healthcarehands.org, and on the entry page in the right column, just scroll down to where it says posts, and there's a link to the slides. We're going to get back to now to the World Cup itself because it amplifies everything we're talking about. And as Mike mentioned before in Tallahassee, what he's experienced in Tallahassee and what I've experienced in the Southeast Conference, it's very, very hot here in the fall and September. Often we have to cancel events for the hurricanes that occur. So I imagine that the World Cup probably has some of the same observations. And every hedonic dynamic is in this brief: celebration, ritual, identity, carnival. They all play out at a planetary scale. When the World Cup arrives, so it's not just here in the United States, it's everywhere, the live event and all across the world. So, it tests how hosts balance the atmosphere against harm. We have fan zones that are amphitheaters, as public viewing sites that turn whole cities into shared alcohol-fueled celebration spaces, bars, and such. We have a host policy that's also in the spotlight. Qatar in 2022 banned stadium beer sales days before kickoff, railing drink into the fan zones themselves. In sponsorship bring restriction, decades of beer sponsorship collide with tighter on-site controls and local norms. So there's so many societal factors that go into this. But in the World Cup, there's the four sets of risk factors. Sociological reviews tie violent behavior among fans not to drink alone, but to alcohol interacting along with the wider setting. So there's socio-cultural norms, masculinity, rival traditions that normalize heavy drinking. There's policing, how security enforcement engages with or inflames the crowds, a consideration for these big events. Event and venue match stakes, crowding, scheduling, and how alcohol is sold and served. That varies. As Mike was talking about N4JEL, the Tallahassee Games, drinking was an issue. Here in Florida, at the University of Florida in Gainesville, for years, alcohol was not sold on. I believe it is now, but people would go out, get drunk, and come in the stadium. You can imagine what they look like when they were in the stadium. And the crowd dynamics, anonymity, contagion of emotion, group identity, and dense crowds. All these are factors that come into play during the World Cup. So the atmosphere and harm intertwined. The alcohol heightens celebration and shared joy, strengthens social bonds and belonging, fuels the festive carnival atmosphere, and anchors the fans in the live in-person moment. And of course, those things already exist, regardless of alcohol. But where the alcohol can come into effect can endanger the crowd, because happy episode of drinking and intoxication occurs, impaired judgment and impulse control, higher risk of hostile reactive aggressions, and safety and public health pressures on the venues. Now, there's no robust evidence, according to the literature, in one of our links here, that clearly links alcohol consumption to disorder at the group level during matches. That was in RAND, a Europe Review of Alcohol at International Football Tournaments. Most fans who drink do not become intoxicated, and attitudes vary widely across cultures. So alcohol can contribute to antisocial behavior, but it rarely acts alone. Organizers still manage it carefully, both inside and outside the stadium. As we mentioned with Qatar, it's not necessarily going to be the same as it were in other countries. And Chip had mentioned some of the tolerance for alcohol, and that regionally can have the effect of amplifying the response to alcohol as well. So rivalry, ritual, and terraces. So where drinking meets devotion. In the UK and England, in the focus group, supporters described alcohol as woven into the rhythm of the football weekend, the soccer football, the football weekend, a marker of belonging far more than a route to disorder. And there's the pre-match pint, where pubs and preloading anchor the match day ritual, a fixed prelude to kick off the Bills' anticipation. There's a derby intensity, local rivalries, sharpen emotion and consumption alike, raising both the atmosphere and the stakes. And there's ultra and the terraces. Organized supporter groups turn the stands into theater, chants, color, collective identity. And in football, we know how intense that can be in soccer. College football does as well. You see it. I think Andy earlier, WDAB, mentioned Cincinnati Bengal fans and how the collective identity was to take their shirts off, some of them with writing on their bodies as well. Some of them died. Well, think about that in the context of World Cup and the large groups of individuals that are doing the same. So the football exception, no fan culture is more closely to drink, more tightly policed for it. So we talk about football. Certainly, in this particular case, we're talking about soccer. So in England and Wales, a 1985 law made football almost unique. Alcohol cannot be consumed within sight of the pitch, within sight of the field where the games are taking place. It's singled out. So drinking in view of the play is banned at football, yet permitted at rugby and cricket. The consideration in the UK, according to this particular 1985 law, and I don't know if it's currently the same. Again, this is quoted from the internet. It's an AI generated slide. May or may not be up to date. Things are on the internet tend to live on for others. I would suggest that you read more about this. Certainly email us if you're familiar with the UK and some of the content of what we're talking about, but it's a contested rule. Supporters argue that the restriction caps the carnivalesque attitude that other sports enjoy freely and built on reputation. So decades old fears of hooliganism, not current evidence, still shape the policy. And that's the irony there. And we certainly know that hooliganism from mass media can be an issue all across Europe with visiting fans, and perhaps this is contributing to why fans from the UK sometimes have severe issues in other countries when they're visiting fans if they aren't able to share the same enjoyment or have the stigma in the UK. So the reputation's under review. So reviewing alcohol at international football tournaments, RAND Europe found the link to disorder far weaker than the stereotype suggests. Most don't overdo it. The majority of fans who drink at tournaments never become intoxicated and rarely acting alone. Alcohol can feed antisocial behavior, but culture and setting matter even more. As Chip mentioned, that when you're enjoying yourself, it amplifies when you're having a good time, but when you don't want to have amplified when you're not having a good time. So it works both ways. It can be much more severe, or it can have even more outcomes when you drink when you're not feeling well. A shifting culture, fans call the violent image outdated, even as new drug culture emerges. So is that the next issue? Taking illicit drugs. So revenues do lean into the poor. Obviously, the business of the bar, once confined to the parking lot, alcohol is now sold inside most major venues. Beer is the top concession. It's a revenue generating engine, among regulating a tool for curbing uncontrolled preloading. The people come in, don't preload ahead of the game and drink there. In American football, the major Power 5 college football programs, 55 or 69 schools now sell alcohol to public on game day. Do we have any comments from our group here on Zoom? This is Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta for ID, Grand Rounds of the Internet, operating from Hawthorne, Florida, AA4FL the mic. Is there anyone on our Zoom simulcast that would like to make a comment on the most recent aspects of our discussion? Go ahead and let me know. Anyone on 20 meters that would like to comment, make your call. We'll move on here. This is the Grand Rounds of the Internet. We're talking about the hedonic effect. We're talking about dopamine in the brain and the body's response. We're talking about pleasure. We're talking about it in the context of alcohol, the context of sports, in the context of the World Cup being held here currently, with the majority of the matches here in the United States, some in Canada, some in Mexico. So obviously there's going to be differences between the three countries. Managing the experience, how do you design for joy and safety these events? So the goal is to not strip out atmosphere, but to channel it, preserving the hedonic upside while reducing the harm. Well, one consideration would be regulate, just don't ban. Controlled in-venue sales, and displace the risky, unmonitored preloading. Offer real alternatives, alcohol-free zones and options, give non-drinkers a fair experience. I don't know how you do that with season ticket holders. I know you could do that at casinos with smoking. You can limit and pace the service, purchase caps and cut off times for curb heavy episodic spikes. I'm not sure how you would implement that. Maybe you'd make all orders be done by app, and you'd be able to control who could get a drink at that time. Mind the timing, having earlier kickoffs and long tailgates tend to concentrate consumption. Plan for it. I know the Florida Gators hate playing LSU home games that take place at 7:30 at night, where people are doing the tailgating and drinking all day. Be a lot more civil to have an early morning kickoff, and in the hot times there, often kickoffs in college sports are early. You might have an 11 or 12 o'clock kickoff. It tends to be TV that dictates revenue when the kickoff times are, unfortunately. policeman proportion, engagement over confrontation lowers, not raises crowd tensions, and target the festivities. Event specific prevention reaches tailgaters and regainers directly. So in summary, what does the evidence actually tell us? Well, alcohol amplifies the hedonic core of fandom. It deepens enjoyment by narrowing focus into the vivid shared present. Also, emotion and consumption feed each other. Celebration draws fans to drink. There's a pregame ritual, which is even more so than kickoff as the peak of the consumption. If you, again, would not have consumption at sporting events, they would preload and still can have issues. Also, behavior is contextual, not automatic. Identify motive and setting, not to drink alone, shape aggression and disorder, atmosphere and harm, shares one source. Smart management preserves the experience while protecting the crowd. If you go online, of course, to healthcarehands.org would be our website. The references, the last slide, and we're using as prompts here, does list I think it's 12 different resources to go by that these comments were generated by. And we do appreciate everybody that's participated today in our grand rounds in the air. The reason why we do grand rounds in the air on Sunday mornings, it's a long-standing Marco tradition, date back to the early days of Marco, a 60-year-old organization, when continuing education for medicine wasn't really possible. This was one way that the grand rounds filled that need. Also, when you were making rounds in the hospital, you couldn't be on the air during the week. The weeks were very long, and Sunday might be the only time before you went to church in the morning to get on the air and meet nationally, internationally, and have these discussions. So we certainly know foul intent, the religion, by having them on this time. Historically is the reason, although other nets exist, and there are other times that we meet as well. Do we have any further questions from the group here on Zoom before we bring the net today to close? Any questions about the discussion for today or additional comments? I'll make a list. Go ahead.
N4JEL.
So we have N4JEL. Any further comments? Okay, go ahead, Mike. N4JEL, Whiskey Bravo Von Delta.
Just to compliment the creativity of whoever selected the subject for this net. I found it fascinating. And as I said, I've observed everything discussed today in Tallahassee. The depressive effect was quite significant whenever the Seminoles lost a game. Going to work the following Monday morning was a very grim exercise. This is N4JEL.
Well, thank you for the comments, Mike. You know, Mike, in my teaching, and I know you work with focus group with students, but one of the FSU related aspects to teaching here is when students make an error and they have to correct it, we use some of the football situations as a way to not overreact and make a mistake in the other direction. And we bring up the wide right and the wide left field goals, where a football team tends to go wide right and then goes wide left first, and the next time might go wide right and overcompensate. And I know FSU partially had a history of that. Many schools do. It's human nature, I suppose. Very hard to be under that pressure and come through. And we do use that as one of those common sense descriptions of how clinical situations can be handled, Mike. Do you remember those wide right and wide left? And where you remember situations that resulted in depressive moments? N4JEL, go ahead.
I certainly do. One of the depressive effects of the hedonic effect of alcohol is I began to cease going to football games because of the alcohol consumption. Having beer spilled down my back by the fan behind me just dampened the delight of the game. So being in a crowd of drunk people didn't appeal to me anymore. And for JEL.
Yeah, and for JEL, AA4FL, the Mike, similar here, but Mike, even before the Florida Gators sold alcohol, which was years ago at the football stadium, the preloading and the tailgating was so severe, they still came in drunk and still had the same problem of spilling drinks on your back. They just weren't alcohol, but unfortunately, sometimes it was vomitous. And when taking the children to the games, just going in the bathroom and have the singing and the foul language, it just took all the joy. I felt really bad taking the kids and having them see that type of behavior. Any other comments from any of our other participants here on Zoom, like similar observations? I'll make your call to Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta.
Jay, do you copy?
Yes, go ahead.
So I attended Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois during the early 1970s. And at that time, Evanston was dry. There was no alcohol sold anywhere in any form. And they had the world headquarters of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. It's different now.
It was WA9ZPL. Yes, and now what we said from the slide, I don't know how accurate it is, 55 out of 69 stadiums serve alcohol. Do you know if Northwestern currently serves alcohol at their games?
Yes, I put something in the comments. They have an enhanced beer garden just south of the field for same day game offerings, multi-level bar and beverage structure, rotating weekly specialty cocktails, and local craft beer, along with Bloody Marys and mimosas.
Well, that's a little bit of concentration there, adding the heavier alcohol drinks than beer. Well, it's I'm sure as we go across the country, as you're listening to this discussion here on YouTube, on our YouTube video that we make from today, you'll identify with the different comments that were made, and feel free to contact us through our link on healthcarehams.org if you'd like to comment on your local environment. And Mike and for JEL, thank you for supporting and recognizing today's discussion. Next week, we were going to cover the World Cup in a little bit different way. There have been considerations and concerns about Ebola from a public health perspective. And there's also been concerns about terrorism in certain areas of the world. So we've been asked to talk about that next week. And we probably will. There'll be a few weeks break after that. We've got field day in July 4th weekend. But at some point, we'll pick up the mesh networking. One other comment that was made, I believe it was Jerry N4TSC, it might be worthwhile for a Grand Mountaineer topic, Jerry, if you're still with us, Jerry. Bill Bradley was a very special individual, and he had a habit of doing something in between games with phone books, and was able to do something special with the brain that perhaps we can have some of our neurologists and psychiatrists talk about. And Jerry, and for TSC, if you're still with us, would you like to pass on your memory of what Bill Bradley was known for? Go ahead. Okay, perhaps Jerry stepped away N4 TSC. Chip N4 N5 RTF, I'm not sure, not being a sports fan, but Bill Bradley was known for his photographic memory, and he would read phone books as a hobby between games, and when somebody would ask him someone's phone number from the phone book afterwards, he'd be able to tell anybody's name that was in the phone book. I think that's exceptional. Chip, and for N5 RTF, do you think that's worthy of a discussion here on the Grand Mountain area? Go ahead.
Yeah, memory, of course, is highly variable. Um, but there have been individuals with hypermnestic abilities all through history. There were people who were documented to have memorized the entire Bible and could begin quoting it from any chapter and verse. Um, there were politicians who could literally, in their minds, draw a line between any two cities in the country and tell you exactly what counties were crossed by that line and what the composition of those counties were politically. Just amazing feats of memory. Some people never forget a face. I, on the other hand, forget every face. So it's it is an interesting subject. People still don't exactly know how memory works. So it would be worth researching it at some point and maybe giving a presentation on it. When is field day this year?
I believe it's the last full weekend of the month, so I would assume it'd be the 28th, but I'd have to confirm that yourself.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to know. Okay.
This is a
One other comment about the topic. Terry and I lived in the French Quarter for 5 years, and we just got used to drunks. Every weekend at least, but sometimes during the week, the tourists were just all over the place. And I mean, you could look at somebody's eyes and tell when they were about to throw up and just avoid them. But it became such a normal thing that you just don't think anything about it. I don't know if anybody else has ever had that experience, but in New Orleans, it's certainly possible. N5RTF.
Well, thank you, Chip N5RTF, Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. Do we have any further check-ins or comments on 20 meters? Make your call to Whiskey Bravo 5 Delta. Thank you for those of you that are listening on our YouTube channel. We do appreciate that, and we are going to close this out here. And you know from listening to the conversation that we discuss and have these discussions on a regular basis. If you would like to request that the Healthcare Hams, the Medical Amateur Radio Council cover a particular subject, please go ahead and email us through our website, healthcarehams.org. And thank you for participating today.